I was folding laundry when the message came in. A name I hadn't seen in 5 years lit up my screen. Tamara Ashby. I paused, a towel half folded in my hands. She was a cousin by marriage, always loud at holidays and quick with a camera, the kind who posted 10 updates before dessert was served. We were never close. But she wasn't the type to reach out without reason. There was no greeting. No emoji, just a single line. I didn't know about the accident. I'm so sorry. He gave such a beautiful speech today. I stared at the screen for a full minute before the words made sense. Accident? Speech? I checked the timestamp. 10 minutes. Ago. Then tapped the attachment. A photo. My breath caught the moment it loaded, a wide group shot. Balloons, fairy lights, people dressed in linen and pastels, the Ashby family reunion, tables of food, someone raising a glass mid-toast. But it wasn't the setting that stopped my heart. It was the centerpiece, a framed photo of me. My most recent headshot, the one I'd used for work in London. Zoomed in, I could make out the gold script on the nameplate beneath it. In loving memory of Claire Donovan. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the towel slipping from my lap to the floor. Time lost shape. My heartbeat thudded fast and uneven, like something was trying to break out of me. What is this? I opened my email. Nothing. Checked social media. My old accounts had been deactivated for years, but my professional ones were still intact. No mentions. Nothing unusual. Then I searched my name. The first result turned my stomach. Claire Donovan, 32, passed away during international travel in 2021 due to unforeseen complications. Survived by her ex-husband, Evan Donovan, and lovingly remembered by the Ashby family. My vision blurred. This wasn't just a lie. It was a story. A constructed truth. Public, polished, accepted. Complete with dates, condolences, even a photo. Of Evan, my ex-husband, holding a candle in my memory. I hadn't spoken to him in years. Not since the divorce. Clean, cold, no kids, no drama. He wanted freedom. I gave it to him. But this was a eulogy. I read Tamara's message again, and this time something sour caught in my throat. She wasn't mocking me. She believed it. They all did. I stood up too quickly and reached for the dresser to steady myself. My thoughts spiraled, cycling through every possible explanation. A mistake, a namesake, a cruel prank. But none of it held. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. A few quick searches told me everything I needed to know. There was a memorial page, a donation link in Claire's honor, dozens of comments, names from my wedding, guest list, offering prayers, sharing memories, grieving, not a single question, not a single doubt. And then the final blow, a photo posted from today. Evan standing at the reunion, hand over heart, a soft, sorrowful smile. My framed photo at his side, delivering a tribute. I clicked on the video below it. Claire had such a bright soul. She always wanted to travel, and I guess that's where she found her peace. We'll never forget her. I hit pause. There was no grief in his voice, only performance, the kind that feels rehearsed, shaped for sympathy, fine-tuned, for an audience, as if he'd spent years perfecting the lines, as if burying me had been easier than facing the truth. I looked around my apartment, scanning for something to anchor me, the plant in the window, the half-finished mug of tea, the sound of the dryer turning behind me. I wasn't dead. My body was still here. My life was still in motion. But somehow, that didn't seem to matter. The world had buried me without hesitation, and Evan had handed them the shovel. I sat again, more deliberately, this time, and opened the drawer beside me. I pulled out my passport, my lease, my ID, my employment contract, documents with my name in bold print, my face in clear resolution. I wasn't a ghost. I had proof, but proof was only the beginning. What I really had now was a choice. I could disappear completely, let them live with their version of the story, preserve the lie. I could make it easy, erase the mess. But something had shifted the moment I saw my photo under the words, "In loving memory." Something inside me, long silent, cracked open, and refused to be buried again. They wanted a ghost? I could give them one. But she wouldn't be silent. Chapter 2. The lie unfolds. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice again. That practiced softness, the solemnity he had perfected, the weight he mimicked like it belonged to him. In the video, he spoke like a man mourning something sacred, like he hadn't walked away without so much as a slammed door. Only a carefully placed key and a note that read, "Don't make this harder than it has to be." But this, what he did, now, this was harder. By morning, I had collected everything I could find: screenshots, archived social media posts, clippings from the memorial page, messages from his fiancée. One in particular stopped me. She would have loved this garden. Evan's done such a beautiful job honoring her memory. Her name was Alicia. Blonde, gentle-eyed, a lifestyle blogger naturally. Her whole aesthetic gave off softness and sincerity. I found myself wondering if she even knew the truth. If he had lied to her too. I called my office and asked for a few days. I didn't offer an explanation. Then I booked a flight. It had been more than a year since I set foot in the States. Even then, I'd only existed on the outskirts. Evan's family had always looked at me with measured politeness, never outright rude, just full of questions they never asked aloud. I wasn't the woman they would have chosen. I was the scholarship girl from art school, the unpredictable match. Evan used to laugh at their discomfort, but eventually it wore him down. Eventually, it became easier to agree with them than defend me. The reunion had taken place at the Ashby Estate, a sprawling mansion in upstate New York, built to impress. The kind of home that looked staged for a lifestyle feature, with hallways too quiet and curated for any real truth to echo. I passed the front gate once before, circling back and pulling in. I didn't know what I expected to find, maybe remnants of a celebration, folding chairs stacked near the hedges, a deflated balloon still tied to a fence. Instead, the lawn looked barely touched. Decorations still clung to trees. Tables held glasses filled with melting ice. A sign near the walkway read, "Welcome home, Ashbys." I parked across the road and stayed inside the car, watching. People lingered on the porch. Children darted through the garden. I spotted Evan's cousin, the one with a voice that always carried across a room. And then I saw him. Evan, wearing a soft blue sweater, smiling, laughing, as if the day held no shadow, as if he hadn't erased me from the world. I turned to the envelope beside me on the passenger seat. Inside were documents, passport stamps, signed contracts, proof of residency, along with a photo taken just last week, me holding a newspaper standing on a London street. The kind of evidence you prepare not for curiosity, but for confrontation. But I didn't reach for it yet. Proof would come later. First, I needed something else. I needed the truth. That evening, I went online and began tracing the paper trail. It didn't take long. I found the obituary submission listed under a user named edonovan02. The death certificate had been filed digitally. The signature slightly blurred but still legible. It was his. The story had been carefully constructed. A vague illness while abroad, complications, cremation, no remains, and no formal service. Just a single line about a private goodbye. It had been crafted for convenience, soft edges, no loose ends. But I wasn't gone. And now, I had returned to the country where Evan had quietly rewritten my ending. I closed the laptop and picked up my phone. Scrolled back to Tamara's message. The caption beneath my photo had been updated since I last checked. Forever missed, never forgotten. Not just untrue, deliberate. And it wouldn't stay unchallenged for long. I stayed at the motel for 2 more days. Cheap towels. An air conditioner that wheezed like it was trying too hard. A lamp that buzzed when you turned the switch too far. None of it mattered. I barely slept. Meals came in crumpled paper bags or didn't come at all. My body was in New York, but everything else in me was still seated at that table, staring at a framed photo of myself surrounded by people who had decided to grieve instead of ask questions. Kept replaying his speech, not the words, but the way he said them. The rehearsed tone, the practiced pauses, the phrase bright soul, spoken like something he'd plucked from a grief manual. Nothing about it carried weight, only shape. But the worst part wasn't the performance. It was the ease with which they believed him. Once, I had been part of their lives. Evan's mother braided my hair the day before our wedding. His niece called me Aunt Claire and drew stick figures of us holding hands. His father once told me I was the only one who made Evan less self-centered, and I believed them. After the divorce, I tried to stay connected. I sent one email, then another. The first went unanswered. The second bounced back. I mailed a card. Months later, it came back with no explanation. Eventually, I stopped trying. Now I understood what I hadn't back then. They hadn't simply drifted away. They had accepted my disappearance as fact. This wasn't grief, it wasn't loss, and it wasn't really about me. It was about Evan, and the version of himself he wanted the world to see. He didn't want to talk about the divorce, or take responsibility for the way he'd ended it. So he gave them something cleaner, a tragedy, a noble departure, a sorrow too sacred to question, and in its place, he began again. A new partner. A family willing to reunite. Sympathy that shielded him from scrutiny. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a symbol, one that made his reinvention look sincere. As I lay on the motel bed, staring at the ceiling, I kept circling the same thought. There's a difference between being forgotten and being written out. This wasn't neglect. It was narrative control. The next morning, I called a lawyer. It wasn't about retaliation, at least not yet. I needed clarity. If I had been legally recorded as deceased, I wanted to know what that meant, how far the fabrication reached, what rights it had stolen. The paralegal on the other end of the call sounded professional but confused. "Do you have any documentation to verify your identity?" "I do," I said. I emailed copies of my passport, a dated photo holding that day's newspaper, and a recent pay stub. She assured me someone would follow up soon. I didn't expect urgency, because the question had moved beyond paperwork. It was about what came after. The silence, the acceptance, the way people moved on without a single hesitation. No one from Evan's family had ever paused to wonder. They'd held a memorial, toasted in my name, reshaped their lives around a false loss. Not one message, not a single question. No one had asked if I was okay, and that was what made it unforgivable. That night, I opened a blank document on my laptop and typed a single line, "You said I died. Let's find out how alive I can be." Then I began a list. Names to contact, records to request, timelines to reconstruct. I wasn't looking to cause a scandal or draw attention. I wanted something quieter, sharper. One moment, one room. One table where I could stand, fully visible, and say what they refused to imagine. You buried the wrong woman. And now, I knew exactly when that moment would come. Evan's parents were celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary. There would be a full guest list, a catered dinner, a family toast in the ballroom where they like to commemorate milestones. Same house. 2 weeks away. Exactly what I needed. I arrived early, just as the light began to fade from the sky. The Ashby estate sat glowing against the trees, its gravel drive already lined with polished cars. Valets in tailored black guided guests inside with the elegance of a staged production. And in many ways, it was. I waited until the flow slowed, then parked just down the road and sat for a moment longer. My pulse wasn't frantic. It had steadied into something quieter, grounded, as if my body had finally caught up to the truth. I opened the envelope one last time. Inside were the documents, organized, recent, indisputable. I wasn't coming with rage. I was coming with evidence, the kind no one in that room would be able to dismiss. Through the trees, I could see soft string lights and silhouettes of guests drifting across the patio. Laughter floated through the hedges, threaded with music and the delicate sound of champagne flutes clinking together. The scene was everything they had always been, curated, comfortable, sure of itself. I didn't approach the front. Instead, I followed the side path that wound through the garden. It was familiar, the same gravel walk Evan and I had once stood on during a summer party, where he kissed me beneath the hydrangeas and told me I made things feel real. Now the memory felt hollow. The side door was unlocked. Of course it was. This was private property, and to them I didn't exist anymore. There was no reason to install defenses when the threat had already been buried. I stepped inside unnoticed, blending easily with the waitstaff. The house hadn't changed. Whitewashed beams, floating candles in tall glass vases, photo frames capturing years of Ashby milestones, birthdays, christenings, trips abroad. In one frame near the stairs, I spotted myself, smiling, arm around Evan, tucked to the edge of the composition. It was the last visible trace of me in that home, and likely the next to be replaced. A woman with a tray passed close by. No one looked twice. In the foyer, I caught a view into the ballroom, chandeliers lit to full brilliance, tables draped in navy and gold, guests beginning to settle into their seats. Then I heard the cue. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Evan Donovan, who will begin the toast. That was when I moved. The ballroom doors opened easily. They didn't creak or groan. They simply gave way. And I walked through them. For the second time in 2 weeks, I found myself facing a crowd that had mourned me. Behind Evan, a slideshow was projected onto a screen. Family photos flicked past. Childhood birthdays, beach, vacations, anniversaries. And then, there I was again. My headshot, my name beneath it, accompanied by a single phrase, "In memory of Claire." I didn't announce myself. I just kept walking until I reached the center of the room. The reaction began. Slowly, a murmur that spread like static. Someone's hand froze midair. A chair scraped the floor. A fork slipped from someone's fingers and hit the porcelain plate with a sharp ring. Heads turned, eyes widened. One guest whispered, "Is that?" Evan looked up and saw me. He froze. For a moment, he didn't move. His mouth parted, but no words came. He simply stared, the color draining from his face like he was seeing something impossible. I stepped up onto the small platform beside him, turned to face the room, and lifted the folder. "This is going to be uncomfortable," I said, my voice even and clear. "But I think I'm owed 5 minutes." No one interrupted. I opened the folder. These are my immigration records, my work history, my passport, my lease, and a photograph taken 3 days ago. I am not deceased. The room fell into silence. I turned to Evan. "You told them I died. You signed the certificate. You reshaped your life on the foundation of my disappearance. And now they know." He opened his mouth to respond, but I raised a hand before he could. "I'm not here to argue. I'm not here to ask for anything. I came because if you're going to bury someone, you better be sure they can't dig their way back out." No one followed me. I walked down the gravel path I used to take whenever family dinners became too much. when I needed quiet more than I needed to belong. Back then, the walk led to silence. Now, every step echoed, not from the ground, but from the weight of what had just broken. Inside the house, the sound was shifting. Chairs scraping, voices lifting, the beginnings of panic disguised as confusion. I heard my name, once, then again, whispered like a secret finally spoken aloud. But I didn't stop. I reached my car, turned the key, and sat with the engine humming beneath my hands. It felt steady, familiar. A heartbeat I hadn't heard in years, finally remembered. The first message came the next morning. Blocked number. A voicemail, Evan's voice, no longer composed. This one cracked and frantic. "Claire, what the hell was that? Do you have any idea what you've done?" Then silence. I didn't call back. I didn't need to. By the time I woke, the story had already begun to unravel. I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't needed to. Someone at the party had recorded the entire confrontation. Just under 3 minutes of me walking into the room, presenting the truth, and leaving them all breathless. The clip had already spread across 3 platforms by the time I saw it. The title was simple: She Walked Into Her Own Memorial. The comment sections were relentless. Some were in disbelief. Some praised the audacity. Others demanded investigations. It was no longer just my story. It had taken on a life of its own. By noon, the lawyer called. "Claire," she said, her voice low, cautious. "You're going to want to come in. There's been movement." She didn't elaborate, but her tone had shifted. No longer skeptical. Now it carried the gravity of someone rethinking everything they thought they understood. I arrived with a coffee in hand and no expectations. She met me at the door, then guided me into her office. A folder waited on the desk between us. She slid it across. "Your death certificate's been flagged for fraud. A case is open." I flipped through the document slowly. The same forged signature stared back. His. A trail of digital filings, transfers, and quiet deletions. She tapped one of the pages. "Did you know he moved money from your joint accounts after declaring you deceased?" "No," I said. "But I'm not surprised." She studied me for a moment, then spoke again. "We can pursue this. Civil, maybe criminal. But it won't. Stay private?" I held her gaze. "I'm not afraid of the truth," I said. And for the first time in a long while, that was completely true. That night, Tamara messaged again. "I didn't know. I swear. I thought it was real." Everyone did. I didn't hold it against her. She hadn't written the script. She had just believed the story she was handed. But I didn't respond. Because when it had mattered, none of them reached out. Not one phone call. Not one attempt to check the facts. And now that I was breathing in front of them again, they didn't know where to place me. It began with silence. For days after the video surfaced, no one from Evan's family contacted me. Not his mother, who had cried through our wedding vows. Not his brother, who once danced barefoot with me in the kitchen when the power went out. And we were young enough to believe that meant something. There was nothing. Then, like a hairline crack widening across a frozen lake, the first message arrived. "Claire, I don't know what to say. I believed him. I'm sorry." It was from Madison, Evan's younger cousin. We hadn't spoken since the divorce. She had sent me a Christmas card that first year, then disappeared from my life completely. I read her message once. Then, again. Then a third time. I didn't write back. It wasn't anger that held my reply. It was the quiet realization that even those who once claimed to love me had chosen the version of the story that asked less of them. Alicia, the fiancée, was the next to reach out. I hadn't expected it. Her name appeared in my inbox one morning with no subject line. Just a blank space and a message I didn't see coming. I didn't know. The email was brief, direct, more honest than I'd imagined she was capable of. He told me you'd died, that it was awful and private, and that I shouldn't ask questions. I thought he was grieving. I didn't know he was hiding something. I'm sorry. I sat with it for a while, the screen glowing in front of me. Eventually, I closed the browser without responding, because this was never about what they had, or hadn't been told. It was about how quickly they stopped wondering. The next update came from the lawyer. The fraud case had progressed. The bank was now formally involved, reviewing Evan's transaction history, flagging suspicious transfers. The insurance company had launched its own internal review, a small policy under his name, claimed quietly, categorized as spousal loss. It wasn't a large payout, but it had legal weight. "This is bigger than he thought it would be," she said over the phone. Good. One night I went for a walk. The air was crisp enough to bite gently at the edges of my coat. I passed a woman sitting on a bench, reading a paperback beneath a streetlight. For a moment, the sight stilled me. Simple, human, ordinary. The kind of moment I used to take for granted. The kind of life I imagined I would always live. I thought about sitting next to her, about asking what she was reading, about pretending I was still someone who could talk about novels and coffee shops without the shadow of false death trailing behind every sentence. But that wasn't me. Not yet. When I returned home, I opened the closet and pulled out a suitcase. Wasn't leaving because I was afraid. I wasn't running from anything. I had spent enough time revisiting places that had been tainted by someone else's choices. It was time to move toward something I could claim for myself, and I knew exactly where to begin. There was one name left on my list, someone who had stayed silent for a reason I had never stopped wondering about. The one person who once said, "If you ever need to disappear, I'll help. But if you ever come back, make it loud." And I was ready to be loud. Her name was Jordan. We met in college, two strangers thrown into a shared dorm room who became sisters by something stronger than blood. We hadn't spoken much since I moved overseas, but with Jordan, time never got in the way. She was the kind of friend who didn't need constant updates to stay rooted in your story. She was also the only one who hadn't reached out after the divorce. Not because she forgot, because she never believed Evan's version of what happened. Not then, not ever. I found her in Chicago, where she ran a nonprofit dedicated to helping women rebuild their lives after trauma. I didn't call ahead. I didn't email. I just took the train with my suitcase and walked to her office on a Thursday morning. Through the glass, I saw her look up and freeze. Then she stood. The door swung open. Claire. Just my name. No disbelief. No questions. She pulled me into a hug that didn't ask for explanation. A kind of embrace that reached all the places I hadn't let myself feel since everything fell apart. We sat in her office with mugs of tea that grew cold between our palms. I told her everything. The message from Tamara, the funeral video, the forged death certificate, the party, the evidence, the bank, the silence. She didn't interrupt, and when I finally stopped, she leaned back and spoke with the same clarity she always had. "You know I never believed it. Evan never had the stomach for clean exits." I laughed, really laughed, the first time I had in weeks. "You're not done," she said. "I know." She gave a slow, measured nod. "So what now?" That night, we stayed up late, surrounded by takeout boxes and the same music we used to blast during finals. The house echoed with nostalgia and comfort, not in a way that asked me to forget, but in a way that reminded me who I had been before it all. Jordan didn't try to fix anything. She didn't offer a plan. She just gave me space to remember that I hadn't always felt this broken. She gave me the guest room, small, clean, quiet. The window overlooked the skyline, and a stack of blank journals sat neatly on the nightstand. Opened the top one. On the first page, I wrote, Claire Donovan, born once, declared dead once, never buried. In the morning, she handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "A contact," she said. "Investigative journalist. She owes me a favor." I blinked, unsure. "You think this is a story?" Jordan didn't hesitate. "I think it's yours. And people like you aren't supposed to disappear without a trace." I stared at the envelope, my fingers resting along the seal. I didn't open it right away. I just held it. Like it might shift the air around me if I did. When I finally broke the seal, I found a name and a phone number written neatly on a business card. Tucked beside it, in Jordan's unmistakable handwriting, was a single line. "Take back the narrative before they bury it again." Her name was Noelle Tran. We met in a quiet corner of a bookstore cafe, the kind of place that smelled like spiced chai, floor polish, and worn hardcovers. She was younger than I'd expected, sharp-eyed, collected, her press badge clipped to her jacket like an afterthought. There was a small recorder on her collar, already blinking red. "I don't want a sob story," I told her as I sat down. "I want the truth recorded." She nodded, calm. "You're not the first woman to be erased, but you're the first who came back like this." So I told it again. The certificate, the false obituary, the fundraiser in my name, the slideshow at a party I hadn't been invited to because I was supposed to be dead. Every detail that made up the version of my life someone else had written. She didn't interrupt. She didn't look away. She didn't try to shape it into something easier to digest. When I finished, she reached for her notebook and said, "Do you want to be named?" I met her gaze directly. "Yes. And I want him named too." The article went live exactly 2 weeks later, declared dead by her ex. She showed up to the memorial. I had prepared myself for the publication, or at least I thought I had. But nothing prepares you for what it feels like to watch your name become a headline. Or to see your story, something that once lived in the quiet corners of your mind, plastered across the front page of a national outlet. Then it spread. First, to local news, then to national radio, then across oceans. There were think pieces dissecting ethics and power, expert panels on fraud, gendered silence, and legal gray zones. People argued in comment sections like their opinions had weight on my skin. Evan's firm suspended him within a day. The police followed with an official investigation. His bank accounts were frozen. The insurance company issued a statement, then went silent. I didn't celebrate, but I read every word. Jordan hosted a small party when the article passed 1 million shares. Nothing extravagant. Just her, a few trusted friends, and the kind of quiet joy that came from knowing something had finally turned. Someone brought champagne. Someone else brought cake with my name spelled wrong in frosting. I didn't correct it. I didn't know how to celebrate something like this. Vindication never came without splinters. But I stood in the corner and let the sound of their laughter pass through me. Not mine, not yet. But a sound I was learning to hold. Later that night, I stepped onto the balcony alone. The city stretched out beneath me, alive with light and motion. Somewhere across that sprawl, Evan might have been reading the same article. Maybe out loud. Maybe for the 3rd or 4th time, trying to find a version of the story he could still control. I let the city breathe beneath me and said my name again, just to hear it out loud. Claire Donovan. No longer missing.